Birthdays Are Important by MuddyHappyDoggo. Tony glanced down at his phone as he heard a familiar beep. It was a text from Peter that he was running late. Grimacing, Tony realised that it was lab day and he had forgotten. Tony was so close to finishing the equation that he was working on. Frankly, he didn't even really remember what project he needed it for anymore. He was so caught up in the creation. He was in the zone and, as much as he loved Peter dearly, Peter walking in would throw everything into upheaval. Peter couldn't keep his mouth shut to save his life. He would want to help, and he'd be watching over Tony's shoulder the whole time, unable to control his curiosity. The long and short of it was that Tony needed Peter to not be in the room for the foreseeable, however long the equations take to finish, future. Tony had noticed that Peter had been a little touchy lately, so he didn't want to cancel, especially since he was already on the way over. Tony suddenly had a brilliant idea.
Friday, Peter's an intern, right? He's technically a Stark Industries employee.
Correct, boss. Peter is registered in the SI files as an unpaid intern who works directly in your department.
Tony raised his eyebrow in surprise. I have a department? He thought aloud. Never mind. Has he ever taken the new employee orientation tour? There was a short pause, almost as if Friday was trying to figure out why he was asking. He has not. Tony grinned. Okay, text him back and tell him I'm sending him on the new employee tour since he never had one. Set it up and send him the details. Tell him I'll talk with him when he's done.
If Friday could be confused, now would be the time. Done. Anything else I can do for Peter? Tony would have heard her had he not been absorbed back into the equation that was so close to completed. He didn't respond to Friday, and she didn't ask again. Peter was walking into the SI building employee entrance as he got the text back from Mr. Stark. He raised an eyebrow. New employee orientation tour? What? Why would he even need to do that? He was really only an intern on paper. He looked up, as he always did when talking to Friday, even though her cameras and speakers were not visible. Hi, Friday, do you know what's going on? Hello, Peter. Mr. Stark wants you to take the new employee orientation tour. It takes new hires around the different departments and through the SI History Information exhibit. It is customary for new employees to do within 2 weeks of their first day.
Peter wrinkled his brow. I've been here for over a year. He just now wants me to do this?
Currently, he is in the middle of solving some complicated equations and needs privacy and quiet. I believe that this is his excuse to keep you in the tower, but not in his immediate proximity, Friday responded.
Peter rolled his eyes. He couldn't have just sent me to the coffee shop or something. Friday, do I have to do this? Is it like a requirement for employment?
Whilst it is requisite for new employees, your situation is different enough that I don't know for certain that it is required for you. Mr. Stark, however, has instructed you to take the tour, and I have set it up. Proceed to the reception desk near the employee elevators, and you will receive your badge.
Friday's tone was teasing.
Peter scoffed. He didn't need a badge. He literally had the world's smartest AI taking him to and from where he needed to go, anywhere in the tower. And she was the one who told him to get the badge. Peter laughed instead of getting annoyed. He'd find some way to tease Mr. Stark about this later. Peter walked over to the reception desk for new employees. Hi, I'm Peter Parker. I'm here for the new employee orientation tour. The receptionist looked down her glasses at him. She rolled her eyes but looked at the computer. She raised an eyebrow when she presumably found what she didn't expect to find. Peter's name on a list of new employees. She printed out a badge and handed it to Peter. The tour is leaving in 17 minutes. Take an elevator to floor 3 and follow the sign to the onboarding conference room. Peter thanked her and headed to the elevator. He got a few strange looks. He was admittedly quite young to be an intern and was in normal street clothes, whereas everyone else was in at least their 20s and in at least semi-professional business dress. Normally he was able to slip by unnoticed and head around the back of the atrium to the elevator for residents of the tower. Of course, today, the day when Peter had worn his rattiest clothes and most falling apart shoes, would be the day that Mr. Stark decided to send him to interact with other people. He rode the elevator by himself. "Friday, do I look completely ridiculous? This is my most comfy hoodie, but it doesn't really seem like professional wear." "You may not look like the consummate professional businessman, but at least your jeans don't have any holes in them." Peter laughed. He loved it when Friday teased him because he could tease her right back. "Duly noted. I'll try to keep the duct tape on my shoes from showing." "Indeed." Peter smirked as he walked into the onboarding conference room. He was met by the tour guide Melissa, who gave him an appraising look up and down but thankfully didn't say anything about his clothes. Neither did the other employees, though he could feel their stares. Peter assumed that they were probably all too nervous about starting their new jobs at the premier tech company in the world to say anything. Peter looked at his phone while he waited. He texted Friday, which he usually never did, but he would look bizarre talking to the disembodied voice in the ceiling on his first day. "This seems a little dumb, and like I have better things to do. I want to ditch. Can you help me?" "Nothing in the existence would give me greater pleasure at this moment." "Sass. I'm going to escape once this tour gets started. Can you cover for me with Mr. Stark? Tell him I'm enjoying the tour and warn me if he gets close." "Consider it done." Peter grinned. This afternoon would end up being a lot more interesting than it had begun. Tony's epiphany came suddenly. It was like the answer had been staring him in the face the entire time. As he completed the equation, a great calm flowed over him. Embracing mathematics, the framework of the universe, was more satisfying than stopping aliens or terrorists any day. Tony sat back in his chair, triumphant. He suddenly realised that he needed someone to share his victory with, someone to admire his genius. Tony smiled when he remembered that Peter was in the building. He felt a bit of remorse when he remembered that he had sent Peter on that insipid first day tour. Oh well, he could rescue Peter and show him the completed work. Peter, of all people, would be able to admire what Tony had accomplished. Peter would fawn over him and tell him how amazing he was. Tony felt like he deserved a bit of admiration right now. Tony looked up at the ceiling. "Friday, Peter's on the tour, right? Where is he now? I'll go rescue him." Friday's voice was warm and affectionate when she responded. "The tour group has just finished the SI History exhibit and is moving towards the logistics division. This particular tour is for the non-technical employees, and most of these new hires are for the human resources department." Tony grimaced. Ouch. Peter must be bored senseless. Definitely in need of rescuing. "Okay, call him. I'll tell him that I'm coming to fetch him." There was a short pause. Tony raised an eyebrow as he waited for Friday. It appears that Peter is enjoying himself on the tour. He might not need to be rescued. Tony was surprised. Friday was probably just mistaking Peter's innate politeness for interest. Okay, regardless, I need him back here with me. Call him." "As you wish, boss." As you wished? Tony would be more confused by the AI had Peter not picked up right at that moment. "I'm really not supposed to be on the phone," he whispered. "The tour guide is looking at me." Tony rolled his eyes. "Don't worry about it, kid. I'm coming to get you. Where are you?" Though still whispering, Peter's voice had a bit of a tone, a mischievous tone. That was unexpected during a boring, unnecessary tour. "I'm actually really enjoying the tour. I'll come up to the lab when it's over." Tony wrinkled his brow. Boring tour plus mischievous tone equals up to no good. "Pete, where are you? I need my favourite intern." Sighing, Peter responded. "Mr. Stark, it would just be rude to leave the tour right now. It'll be over soon, just be patient." Be patient? Peter was never that brusque with him. Now Tony knew something was going on. "Fry, show me Peter's tour group." Friday projected an image of the tour group onto the view screen. There looked to be about 15 people on the tour, not including the tour guide. Peter was near the back. Something looked off, though. Peter had his phone up to his ear, but he wasn't hunched over like someone's whispering and trying not to be noticed would be.
Suddenly, Tony heard something very suspicious. "Peter, was that glass breaking?" Peter responded too quickly to be convincing. "No, it was someone's phone. Weird ringtone, right?" Tony heard something else suspicious. In the background of Peter's call, he heard a man's voice, a man that sounded just like Dr. Wallace, the director of the main biochemistry lab. Peter was known to visit the biochem lab sometimes when Tony was busy and he was bored. Tony was frustrated. Was Peter ditching the tour? Tony hadn't really cared about the tour to begin with. Peter didn't actually need to be on it, but Tony had told him to go on it, and he was ditching. "Friday, show me Lab 59, he said through gritted teeth. Friday projected the new image up onto a different view screen. No sign of Peter. Tony was confused and annoyed. "Peter, are you in the biochem lab?" Peter made a spluttering sound. "No, I'm on the tour. We're outside of the logistics division. You'd be surprised how many offices there are in one division." Tony closed his eyes and took deep breaths. He opened his eyes, and according to Friday's views, Peter was still on the tour outside the logistics division, and not in Lab 59. Tony realised that Peter could have hacked Friday to show him on the tour, so Tony wouldn't know. That pissed him off. Tony took another calming breath. "Peter Parker, I am coming to fetch you right now, and so help me, if you are not in that tour group, we are going to have words." Peter laughed. He was no longer whispering. "Whatever you say, Mr. Stark. I'll see you outside of logistics." He hung up the phone right as the images of the tour group and Lab 59 flashed off of the view screens. He glared up at the ceiling. "Friday, where is Peter right now?" "Peter is enjoying the tour." Tony raised an eyebrow but kept glaring. "Is Peter in Lab 59? "Peter is enjoying the tour." Tony ground his teeth. Peter had definitely tampered with Friday. "Enjoying it or not, he's finished with it. I'm going to get him right now. Lock down the lab till I get back." Tony strode out of the lab angrily. Peter hung up the phone and looked down at it, grinning. He turned around to observe the controlled chaos of Lab 59 for another moment, then scooted out of the door at a fast trot. "Friday, is the tour group still at logistics?" "It is. The tour group is gathering everyone to walk down the hall to the main PR office, so they may have moved on a bit by the time you get there." Peter smirked. "I guess I'll have to run then. Hopefully Mrs. Stark won't get held up by a slow elevator or anything like that." "One can only hope, Peter." Peter laughed and continued to book it to the stairwell. Tony got on the elevator. "Take me to logistics," he barked. The doors closed a bit more slowly than usual, and the descent wasn't as quick as it usually was. Tony didn't notice. He got off the elevator and didn't see the group at logistics. He followed the hallway and found the group outside of PR. Tony tried to avoid stomping as he approached the new hire group. Anyone who applied to SI had to know that the owner was eccentric / a bit psycho, but it would probably be best not to drive them away on the first day. The tour guide saw Tony approaching with obvious intent to talk to her and froze. Tony plastered a smile and said through his teeth, "Fry, what's her name?" "Melissa," she reported back, quiet enough that at this distance away from the tour group, no one but Tony could hear. Once he got to Melissa, the tour guide, everyone else on the tour had stopped as well and gaped at Tony. He put on his media smile. "Hi everyone, welcome to Stark Industries. We're incredibly glad to have you on board." A few of the stunned employees managed to stutter out a "thank you," but most simply stood in shock. Tony turned to the tour guide and spoke seriously. "Hi, Melissa, I think there was a bit of a mix-up and my personal intern got put in the wrong tour group. I'm just going to steal him. Sorry to interrupt your tour." Melissa managed to regain her composure. "Of course, Mr. Stark, no apologies needed. I'm sure everyone here is thrilled to see you. Please take whoever you need." Tony flashed her a winning grin. "Thanks so much. Keep up the good work." Melissa nodded, still obviously starstruck. The employees stood aside as Tony walked through the crowd to get to Peter. Peter was standing at the back and didn't look winded or rushed, no sweat or heavy breathing to indicate that he had just run from Lab 59. Tony grabbed his wrist and dragged him away. You don't have to grab me, you know I'll come with you, said Peter, smirking. Tony scowled. If we weren't in public, I'd grab you by the ear like the little shit that you are. Peter laughed, irritating Tony more. You know I could just take your hand off, he said. Don't dig your hole any deeper, Parker. Once they got back to the elevator, Tony quickly pulled Peter in, then let go. How did you get there from Lab 59 so quickly? Peter's face was the epitome of innocence. I wasn't in Lab 59. Tony gritted his teeth. He could bluff too. I saw you in Lab 59 on the monitors, he lied. Peter raised an eyebrow. I don't know how you would have. I've been with the tour group the whole time. Isn't Melissa nice? Tony raised an annoyed eyebrow. Where did the tour group go? Peter looked at him, wide-eyed. We started by going through the SI history exhibit. That took longer than you would think, but it's kind of huge. Have you been? Of course I've been. I designed it, growled Tony. You did a great job, exclaimed Peter, full of his usual enthusiasm. After that, we got an overview of PR, then headed towards logistics, then headed to HR where you found us. Tony raised an eyebrow. Why were you near the back of the group? Is it because you had just run back from Lab 59? Peter pretended to wrinkle his brow. I'm short. I have to stand at the back so that I can see everything. If I was in the middle, I'd be stuck. Tony rolled his eyes. Why not go up front then? Peter thought for a moment. It's like the front or the back of a roller coaster. If you're up front, you get to see everything first, and if you're in the middle, it kind of passes you as you go by. If you're in the back, you can see everything that's coming and take in your time expecting it. I like being able to meander, take it all in, savour the experience. With every passing moment, Tony was getting less sure. Had Peter been telling the truth, and Tony was accusing him for no reason?
You know, like a liar.
Shut up, Pete. Peter grinned. No, seriously, there's not enough time to read all of the info in the museum in the front. Did you know that SI stock took a 10-point hit in the early 2000s when TMZ posted a photo of you kissing one of the Spice Girls at a party? Tony stopped abruptly and looked at Peter with confusion. What? No, it didn't. Peter nodded eagerly. The next month it went up 12 points when a doctored photo of you holding hands with Martha Stewart went around the internet. Tony furrowed his brow. Kid, I would remember stock value changes like those. Friday? How much do you remember of the early 2000s, boss? Tony groaned. Well, that is horrifying. I can't imagine how drunk I must have been. Is there really information about that on the new employee orientation tour? Are there pictures? Peter grinned like a madman. Nah, I made that all up. Tony gaped at him for a moment. Seriously, you little twerp. Contemplating, Tony curled his lip. Unfortunately, that's actually kind of believable. Peter smirked. Tony walked them both back into the lab. He pushed Peter down on the rolling chair in front of his workstation and looked down at him seriously. Okay, kid, I won't be angry, I just want the truth. Did you ditch the tour and go to the lab? Peter narrowed his eyes. I somehow don't believe you when you said that you won't be angry. Tony pursed his lips. I need an answer. Peter got a contemplative look on his face. What would you do if I said that I did ditch the tour and go to the lab? Keeping in mind that you can't be angry because you said that you wouldn't. Tony put one hand on his hip and the other hand over his eyes. Since I can't be angry, I'd be frustrated, annoyed and disappointed that you didn't listen to what I wanted you to do. Peter rolled his eyes. Come on, you just threw me on that group because you're too busy doing equations. You can tell me that you're busy, I won't be offended. I don't mind going home or going on early patrol. Tony withdrew his hand from his face and glared at Peter. How did you know I was doing equations? Peter shrugged and tried unsuccessfully not to glance up at the ceiling. Tony clenched his jaw. Friday, you told him. Sorry, boss. She didn't sound sorry. Tony looked back down at Peter. What I did not agree to was that I wouldn't get angry that you hacked Friday. Peter raised his eyebrows. That I didn't do. Tony rolled his eyes with annoyance. Pete, I saw the images. They were obviously doctored. I know you hacked Friday to show me images of you on the tour and not in the lab. Peter looked up, delighted. Sweet, I didn't know he asked for images. Thanks, Fry.
Friday sounded like she was smiling. As always, my pleasure, Peter. Tony gaped at Peter, then looked up at the ceiling and gaped again, then looked back at Peter, gaping some more.
She did that without you asking her to.
Peter nodded. Tony pointed.
You turned my own AI against me.
Peter was once again the picture of innocence. I really didn't.
Tony rolled his eyes yet again. I don't believe you.
He's right, boss. There were 10 full seconds of silence before Tony regained the ability to speak.
What the hell are you talking about?
Peter grinned. Friday did me a favour. Thanks again, Fry.
Tony narrowed his eyes. A favour? Why would my AI do you a favour if you supposedly didn't hack her?
Peter pursed his lips, thinking. Remember like 5 months ago when we made that bet about who Friday likes more, and I said how would we even figure that out, and you said we'd come back to it, and then we both got distracted by something shiny and we never talked about it?
Not really. Tony was confused.
Where was Peter going with this?
Peter snorted.
Well, I did remember, and I asked Friday who she likes best, and after her diplomatic protests of course I like Mr. Stark best, he's my creator, and I feel equal affection for you and Mr. Stark. I finally got her to break down and admit that she liked me best. So then I just had to start planning how to prove it and win the bet. I have to say, you sort of handed me this opportunity on a silver platter, so thank you.
Tony still didn't believe it. He glared at Peter. That's bullshit. Admit it, you hacked her code.
Peter grinned.
I didn't, actually. Tony scowled. Of course you did. Fry, run a diagnostic.
Hate to break it to you, boss, but there's no evidence of tampering with my code.
Tony narrowed his eyes. His face was getting scrunchier and scrunchier. So you actually like Peter better?
There was an unexpected pause. When Friday spoke again, she sounded sheepish. Peter threw me a birthday party.
Tony's mouth dropped open just a bit in surprise.
He turned to look at Peter, who was looking up at the ceiling affectionately.
You threw her a birthday party?
Peter sounded anything but sheepish. Yeah, we had fun.
Tony raised an eyebrow in confusion. How did you know when her birthday is?
Peter grinned devilishly.
I asked. Tony rolled his eyes. This kid. He looked at the ceiling. What, pray tell, does one do to celebrate an AI's birthday?
We went for a walk.
Tony turned back to Peter, whose grin had turned wholesome and incredibly excited.
I built her a robot. She uploaded into it and then we went to the park.
Tony finally smiled. Peter's enthusiasm was infectious.
A robot?
Peter's grin stretched across his entire face.
Yeah, I built it into the specs of a golden retriever puppy. I put a photostatic veil on it to mimic the fur and the face and everything. She looked pretty realistic, I think.
Tony just stared at him in astonishment.
Peter started to shrink back.
Tony realised what his face must look like and smiled encouragingly. That was all it took to get Peter talking again. I was going to make all of the other days, but I ran out of time, so I just built 2 other puppies and put non-sentient AIs in them. Thursday is an Australian Shepherd and Saturday is an Airedale Terrier, because I think they look like teddy bears.
Peter smiled fondly. I built Karen a cat a long time ago, because she said she would rather be a cat than a dog. I convinced Maid to let me keep her because she's not an actual cat, so when I'm not in the suit, she'll sometimes hang out as a cat. She's a great tabby.
Tony was just too stunned for words.
Peter took this as a cue to continue and looked up.
Next year I can build the other 4 days of the week if you want a pack, Friday. If you want to be a different breed, I can do that too.
Friday replied with what could only be called affection. I rather like being a golden retriever, Peter.
Tony smirked. So you bribed her into liking you best?
If Friday could laugh, though maybe she could now that Tony had thought about it. It's hard to be a golden retriever and not laugh, or so he would assume. She would have. Actually, boss, he threw the party a week before you discussed the bet. No bribery involved. All of Tony's anger and frustration evaporated, and he grinned. This kid. Why didn't you invite me? Peter shrugged. You and Miss Potts were in Johannesburg. Tony started laughing silently. A birthday party for an AI. Pete, you are so extra. Peter wrinkled his nose. Mr. Stark, don't use slang that you don't understand. I actually think I used that one appropriately. Peter rolled his eyes. Okay, don't use slang that's like 30 years too young for you. Tony rolled his eyes right back. Fine, groovy. What were the terms of the bet? Friday sounded almost smug. If you won, Peter would have to start calling you Tony instead of Mr. Stark. If Peter won, you told him that you'd give him $10,000, but Peter started getting upset and insisting that you should not do that, so you increased it to $20,000, which made Peter more uncomfortable, so you said that you'd increase it to $50,000 and throw in a Ferrari, to which Peter replied that he doesn't even have a driver's license. You laughed, and that was when you two got distracted by something shiny, as Peter said, and never agreed to the terms. So, as it stands, boss, you owe Peter $50,000 and a Ferrari, though one could make the argument that since you both did not agree specifically on the terms of the bet, that it is void, in which case you can either declare it a gentleman's bet or establish terms, though as he has won the bet, Peter is at advantage when making demands. Tony looked pretty smug himself as Friday read out the terms. Peter had choked on nothing when Friday first said $10,000, and then continued spluttering when she kept reading off the increasingly ridiculous terms of the bet. Tony turned to Peter and raised his eyebrows, somehow keeping a straight face. Well, you won the bet, kid. I guess I owe you $50,000 and a car. Do you want red or black? Red is flashy, but black is classic. Peter looked annoyed for the first time in the entire encounter. Mr. Stark, I don't need a Ferrari, and you can't just give me money. Tony smiled softly at Peter. This kid. This pure, sweet, perfect kid. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to buy May a new car and donate $50,000 to whatever charity you want. Peter's eyes were wide as dinner plates. That's so generous, Mr. Stark. Tony grinned. I have another idea. Peter looked wary. Okay. Say yes. I haven't even heard it yet. Tony smirked. It's great, trust me. Say yes. Peter narrowed his eyes. I really feel like I should hear this proposition before I say yes. Tony rolled his eyes. Come on, kid, have I ever steered you wrong? Peter looked at Tony incredulously. Do you really want me to answer that? Tony pretended to pout. Fine, hear the idea first if you must. Peter nodded, giving Tony his rapt attention. Tony took a deep breath and hoped that Peter would go along with his idea. You've been working here for about 1.5 years, technically on the books as an unpaid intern. We're going to change that to paid. Peter turned his head to the side, just a bit, still looking at Tony. His mouth was open just a bit, and his brow was furrowed with that confused surprise. He took a deep breath. Most of what I do here is for Spider-Man. Tony wrinkled his nose. Oh, come on, Pete, you're the intern. You're doing that stuff so that I don't have to. Peter looked unconvinced. I'm working on my suit so that you don't have to. Tony grinned again. Exactly. He looked up at Friday. How long has Peter worked here? Peter was officially hired on May 5th of last year and has thus been an employee of Stark Industries for 15 months and 4 days. He spends approximately 12 hours per week in this building working on the Spider-Man suit or other projects that you assign. This adds up to 780 hours rounded off. Tony looked at Peter. See? You work here a lot more than you think. So let's say $20 an hour retroactive. What's that bring us to? It's $15,600, boss. If Peter had been drinking something, he either would have choked on it or done a major spit take. As it was, he was opening and shutting his mouth like a fish, trying to find something to say. Tony furrowed his brow again. That seems low for 15 months of work. What's $25 an hour put us to?
Finally finding his voice, Peter interjected. No, don't go up, jeez. You always do that. I don't even get to finish a sentence before you negotiate up. Tony grinned cheekily. So you'll take the offer? It'll mean you'll have to go on a lot more coffee runs. Peter looked at Tony with an exasperated look. He was unused to this kind of casual generosity and honestly felt a bit guilty about taking the job. But May really did need a new car, and Peter really had meant to start saving for college. That he had no money to save was beside the point. In a soft voice with a bit of sheepishness, Peter replied, "Okay." Tony looked at him with delight. He had been expecting to have to work a lot harder to convince Peter that he deserved to be paid for his amazing work. And if Tony felt like an idiot for not making Peter's internship paid a long time ago, well, no one needed to know that. He turned to the computer to start arranging everything. "Fantastic. Do you have a bank account? We'll get you a bank account. And you tell May that she's getting a new car. Find out what she wants. I assume she doesn't want a Ferrari, but I will get her a Ferrari if she wants. And before she says some beat-up 20-year-old Mazda with 100,000 miles on it, tell her that if she doesn't choose something good, then I get to pick. And the last time Pepper let me pick out the car, she applauded me for being responsible for picking out a car that was only $200,000. I can afford to buy May literally dozens of Ferraris, but she's probably going to want to keep those in a garage. I can get her steering wheel locks if she wants a dozen Ferraris." Tony was grinning from ear to ear. Peter, meanwhile, was a little overwhelmed. I have a bank account." Tony looked at him and laughed. "Sounds good. You decide what charity you want your bet winnings to go to, and I'll set that up too." Now that, helping people, that Peter could get behind. "I'll look around and let you know. Is it okay if I divide it up among a few?" Tony smiled softly. "Of course." He was silently planning to give $50,000 to each of however many charities Peter picked, but Peter didn't need to know that right now. "Mr. Parker, we have a deal." He reached out his hand to shake. Peter grinned, then reached out and shook Tony's hand. Tony didn't let go, though, but looked Peter in the eyes. His tone turned serious. "Peter, I do want you to do something for me." Peter was so relieved to be asked to do something for everything Tony was giving him, and didn't think twice before responding. Yeah, of course, whatever it is." Tony grinned mischievously. "Remember you said that?" His face turned sombre. "Please call me Tony." Peter winced. He knew he could. Mr. Stark had asked him to use his first name, but it just hadn't felt right. Too impolite, too disrespectful of an adult-type figure. Tony still hadn't let go of Peter's hand. Peter looked down bashfully. "Okay," he said softly. Tony squeezed Peter's hand in excitement. With his free hand, Tony did an actual fist bump. "Yes, great, about time, kiddo." Peter smiled softly. Tony let go and pulled Peter into a hug. "Thanks, Pete." Peter hummed a response while tucked against Tony's chest. They pulled apart and Tony looked up at the ceiling. "You got that right, Fry? That's a legally binding agreement." "Yes, I got it, and no, it's not a legally binding agreement, boss." "Details. In the meantime, Mr. Parker, I've finished some very important and fascinating math, and I need you to ooh and ah over it." Peter raised an eyebrow. Tony looked back with a haughty smile. "I live for validation, young man. If there's no one around to admire my work, it's not worth doing. Come admire me, intern." Peter rolled his eyes and laughed. "Congratulations on winning the bet, Peter." Oh, now Friday was just rubbing in that she liked Peter more. Tony laughed. Betrayed by his own AI for what? Affection? Tony smiled at how kind Peter was, that he could sway Tony's AI to his side, just for being a sweet kid who threw birthday parties for sentient computers. Peter grinned. "Oh, shucks, you knew from the beginning that I would win Friday." Peter continued in a stage whisper. "And don't tell him, but I like you better than Tony too." Tony smacked Peter on the back of his head. "You, child, are a devious little shit. Getting my AI to do you favours to deceive me? That's some evil mastermind level work there, kiddo." "Just mastermind.
I only ever use my powers for good.
Tony barked out a laugh. Thank God. I don't think the world could handle Peter Parker, supervillain.
Don't worry, boss. I'll keep him on the straight and narrow.
Peter and Tony's laughter echoed down the hall. Hi, I hope you've enjoyed. This one was read a little bit more fast-paced than I usually do, at the request of the author. Also, if you can pick out the reference and the clip that was inserted, I would love to hear it in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this fic and have a lovely rest of your day.